Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, wanted to do a quick video here for you today to talk about a post that actually is going to come out today. I was going to actually delay this post for a little while, but I decided to move it up, mostly because I didn't quite have the same amount of time that I thought I would to do some of the research I wanted to do in other posts. So the topic here, once again, is going to be National Pastime, the old Clifford Van Beek game. And there are a couple things that I found while I was sort of snooping around the old newspapers. The big question that we have here is exactly how many of these National Pastime games were created. I know that the answer that people will tell you is, oh, well, there were 500 created, or someone told me there were 2,000 created, 500 were sold. If you look in other sources, the old Strat-O-Matic review article will tell you there were 400 sold, not 500. So I'll give you an example sort of exactly what it is that we're looking at here, right? So this is the APBA journal from January 31st, 1997, which I don't have a physical copy of. I did at one point in time, I think, but we'll go back here to page 19, and this is where we see this article by Scott Lahotsky. Scott Lahotsky was one of these guys who spent quite a bit of time with the APBA journal looking not only into National Pastime, but also looking into games that potentially could have influenced Clifford Van Beek. I will be honest with you, I think that he wasted a lot of his time doing this because I don't think that there was any game that influenced Clifford Van Beek. I think that there's a reason why he got a patent for his game. Anyway, we'll go ahead and keep that here. One of the big questions that we have, though, about the history of National Pastime is exactly what happened here. And now the part here that I want to sort of emphasize here, and let's see if I can get this zoomed in a little bit so you can see it. There we go. It's a part that's down here as we scroll down a little bit. Right. So the inventor of this game, National Pastime, was Clifford Van Beek, a Green Bay, Wisconsin grocery store owner who had sold approximately 500 National Pastime games before his printer went bankrupt in the Great Depression of the 1930s. This spelled the end of Van Beek's major games company, and he never produced a sports game again. Right? See that? All right. What I'm about to show you here is evidence that that's not true. All right. This is the crazy part, and I couldn't believe this when I found it. So first of all, we'll zoom out a little bit here. This is from the Green Bay Press-Gazette, Monday evening, February 1st, 1932. You're going to see this in the blog, too, if you go over and click onto the blog, the blog post that accompanies this, which I will link below in the description. Major games company sued for $250 note. And so it lists here as the commercial printing company plaintiff who sued the Major Games Company, which, of course, was run by Clifford Van Beek, as well as a person named R.C. Rondeau. Now, I looked up R.C. Rondeau, couldn't find much about him. I will tell you that Clifford Van Beek started a semi-pro basketball team called the Green Bay Grocers, and there were a couple of guys on that team whose surname was Rondeau, so I'm assuming that he knew him through the basketball team or knew him beforehand through some way or something like that. Claims here that both of them were partners in the company. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe somebody from the Van Beek family would know. Because this hasn't been listed anywhere, I'm assuming that we just don't know. Now, what happened is Van Beek said that he had decided not to pay this note until a number of card games which he had ordered printed were delivered. He had originally ordered 1,000 games and had received 500 of them. So that's the story that we've heard a lot of, which is that he received 500 games and there was a balance of games that were not printed. Some sources have said it was supposed to be a total order of 1,000. Some said a total order of 2,000. And some said the total order was 500. It depends upon whose source you're reading, as stuff has got really confused over the years. Now, if you understand the way the printing worked traditionally, this is not unusual. My understanding of how printing worked traditionally in the United States is that the printer would print sort of like a test run, the first pressing of something, and would receive a portion of the full amount that was due at the beginning, and then would withhold the printing of the rest until the balance was paid. And this, in theory, would allow you, if you were trying to sell a book or sell a game or sell cards or sell whatever, to be able to get a certain amount printed first, to go over and sell your allotment and then use the money that you get from that allotment to pay for the rest. We know from other sources, and I can show you the ad, it would take me a little while to find it here, but we know that Clifford Van Beek charged $3 for the National League set, $3 for the American League set, or you could get both together for $5, right? And so 500 games of $5 each for each set would have been, in theory, $2,500 of income that the company could have generated, or of revenue, I guess we could call it. Now, Clifford Van Beek was sued here because he had paid $450 of the original note and had cited renewal on the balance of It says here $250. The truth is, as we're going to see in a second, this was actually $200. So he was taken to court over this in 1932, right? Now, remember, this game actually came out for sale originally not in 1931, but in December 1930. That's going to be the topic of another video. But that first sporting news advertisement for National Pastime came out not in December 1931, as people have reported, but rather in December 1930. We know that because we can look at the sporting news from December 1930 and we can see it right there. I think it's from December 11th, 1930. Now we look at the news here the next day, and what we see here, and this is the part that really should make you sort of scratch your head a little bit, is that Giggler, the owner of the printing shop, won $200 verdict in suit. So the verdict in the end was that Van Beek had to pay $200 with no interest for the amount that he owed for the remainder of the games. Right, so this was part of a contract that Clifford Van Beek had entered into, and he wound up having to pay $200 for it. Van Beek basically was charged $650 to print 1,000 games. In theory, that should have, had he been able to sell all of those games, that should have provided him with more than enough money, as far as I understand, for the advertising he did in several publications, plus a little bit of a profit in the end, perhaps to reinvest in the company for the next season's worth of cards. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and instead, Van Beek said that he would not complete payments on the renewal of the balance until the rest of the games were delivered to him, which I'm assuming went against the letter of the contract. And the reason why I assume that is, of course, because Van Beek lost this trial, right? This is what really spelled the end of the Major Games Company. After this, you don't hear anything from them at all. Now, regarding whether the printer went out of business, let me show you this. This is from May 14th, 1932. Right, so the name of the printing company, of course, is, what do they call the commercial printing company? Guess what? If I'm going to search for commercial printing company in this paper, I'm probably not going to come up with so many results. But I did come up with a number of results for Earl J. Giggler, who was actually pretty prominent in Green Bay society in those days. By the way, so was Clifford Van Beek, and this is one of the things that has been lost through time as we've told the stories and the legends of this. Van Beek was orphaned when he was young, but this doesn't mean that he was some poor kid who had no place to live. He ended up living with his grandparents most of the time, and he had enough money to go through at least some schooling and to have at least some sort of legal counsel to help him apply for the patent, and he had enough money to start financing this game. It doesn't come out of nothing. As you can see here, though, again, from May 14th, 1932, there's this little piece that talks about how Giggler would employ as many as 20 people at one time in his South Broadway shop in Green Bay, and that there was a lot of quality work being done at the commercial printing company. This, in my mind, is proof positive that the commercial printing company did not go out of business. In fact, and I haven't looked it up here for you, but if you look at the blog, you will see that I found another article from the early 1940s with the same company under the same ownership at the same address, talking about how they just had received a government contract for printing. So the truth of the matter is that Clifford Van Beek's printer did not go out of business. It was Clifford Van Beek who went out of business. This makes me believe that National Pastime as a game did not sell its full 500 copy allotment. I really, really doubt that that's the case because the money doesn't add up. He would have had enough money to pay $200 or $250 or whatever it would have taken if he had actually sold the, $2,500 worth of product. I don't think that he sold that at all. And I think one of the reasons why National Pastime is so difficult and so rare and so scarce and just so hard to find is because it didn't sell. Look, if you go onto baseball card collector sites and you look up like a Jimmie Foxx rookie card, the first Jimmie Foxx card that comes out, I believe, is a Play Ball in 1932, 33, something like that, right? Nobody talks about the 1930 National Pastime card for Jimmie Foxx at all, but that should be his rookie card. And in fact, that was sent out for free, as we know, with the brochure that you could write into the Major Games Company and have delivered to your house. Where are all those cards? How come nobody's collecting those? How come nobody's talking about those? I mean, yeah, we know that a lot of baseball card collectors don't like collecting game pieces, but there are others who do. Those advertisements that you'll see on eBay for, individual APBA cards or NPIII cards or Strat cards or whatever, there are some people who buy those because they are collecting cards from a specific player, right? Well, how come we don't see more of these Jimmie Foxx cards out there? That's the other question I have to ask. I mean, I know that in World War II there were paper runs. I know that there was a bunch of things that could have caused these things to be destroyed. But I strongly suspect the National Pastime not only did not sell 500 copies, I don't think it sold 100 copies. I think that this was a massive commercial failure, and I think that we're just fortunate that J. Richard Seitz had parents who were well-to-do enough to spend a bunch of money buying baseball games for him to play around with, and that he happened to have this interest. Because if it wasn't for J. Richard Seitz having this interest, this game would not only be like, a footnote in history, nobody would know anything about it, and I mean, maybe 1 or 2 copies would surface somewhere and nobody would care. Anyway, so there's the thing about this. I hope that I wasn't a little bit too harsh on this. This is one of the things I worry about because I know that the APBA community kind of has a close-knit relationship with the Van Beek family and has for a couple of decades now. I don't want to go as far as to say necessarily that Van Beek was lying straight out, but I do think that he was misrepresenting what happened with this printer and what happened with his business. I think that Clifford Van Beek was a genius. I think that we do a disservice to him by not giving him credit for what he created. And I think that the evidence is pretty strong that he created this by himself and that there was no, other game. He wasn't playing Fanitis or whatever garbage it is that the APBA Journal thought was happening back in the late 90s, early 2000s. APBA Journal editorial staff wasted a lot of time, climbing up trees where there was nothing, right? And where nobody was really interested in it. No, they should have given Van Beek the credit for what it is that he did. Having said that, he was not just a poor businessman. I don't think that he sold anything. I think it was a complete and utter failure. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, and we can talk more about it. And I'm going to have more videos like this. Talk to you later. Bye.